Okay, I'm going to repeat everything I just said to set up the whole meeting. I'm just kidding. Who would like to start off by showing us their demo?
I don't have the updated code cloned down. Rachel, do you want to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
All right. Woo!
I can help obviously follow through. But.
All right. Give me just a second to get set up. Here.
You all see my cup?
What is on
Dude, there's someone there.
It's Richard Iwati.
I love him.
Oh, I love him. Yay.
So good, right?
Yeah, that's hysterical.
Here's my birthday present last year. It's so good.
Nice.
You have to get it on Etsy, and it's like ridiculously expensive, but it's totally worth it.
You have some other cool coffee cups, don't you, Stacey?
Yeah, I have one with Bigfoot on it, straight out of the Oregon wilderness.
Oh, that's a good one. Nice.
Andrew wanted to make sure I was a believer and sent me a Bigfoot cup. Actually brought it to me. I saw you in person. That's right.
That's right. Well, it's like I went down to San Jose for a couple of days, and Stacey's like, "I'll drive down from Sacramento to Cohort." I'm like, "That's ridiculously nice of you." So, brought her a coffee cup.
Okay. Okay, so I've got it up.
Yeah.
Wow,
We just did
Fancy
some like
style.
minimal styling, just to kind of
That's perfect.
help get us somewhere, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're at the list page, we just treated that as our home page, our home route. So it's just a slash route, and then you click add items, and you see this rough little arrow, but it does show up, and it does take you back. And you can use that. These essentially do the same thing. Item list and the back arrow do the same thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's it.
Excellent. Do you want to show us like what's going on in the code? Like maybe walk us around a little bit. It'll be helpful because everybody will interact with these features at some point and have to do something with them. So
Oh, right.
a little tour would be cool.
Cool. So what we've got here is in the app.js file, this is where the routing is going and just a little bit of state to handle the color changing for the buttons. And just passing those props here, a couple of little functions here to handle that. And then we have our little list file that just has nothing in it at all except the word list. And then we have a header that just handles the routing for clicking back and just has that little arrow. And the footer is actually what contains the main buttons. And then add items is just like list, it has nothing yet, just a div. And then we have just some CSS. And this is how I learned when I was learning React, this was how I was taught basically just through the course I took to structure it. So I don't know if that's good or bad, really.
I love it. I think it's good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's what we got.
Nice. Yeah, there are always lots of ways to do these things, but yeah, I think that works really well.
Okay, cool.
Really good job. It's fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, so as you notice, we use like hooks for the state and then just general props for passing it down. I think the 4 things we were meant to do was use React Router. So we imported that. Changing the color when you toggle back and forth between the home/list and the add, and then the back button. And there's one more.
Can you show the changing of colors when you click?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the darker shade is
a little bit darker.
Yeah, we kind of modeled that.
Yeah, nice.
Andrew already had live. So, yeah.
Very cool.
And Matthew remembered putting prop types, which I thought was great. I totally forgot about that. That was helpful.
There's a really handy shortcut where you just type RACFP in a blank file and it immediately populates like with the boilerplate. And so I use that a lot when I'm starting a new like React component.
Nice.
Very good. Okay.
I'm curious if the prop types helped you in development. Did you ever see like you were passing in the wrong thing to a component and then get something printed out to your console saying, "Hey, check this out"?
Yeah, at one point.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Rachel.
Oh, it's okay. Well, at one point, we had a problem with the state, and I was doing some renaming, and the renaming didn't make it to the prop types names, and so the prop types kind of threw a little error, and I was like, oh yeah, okay.
That's cool.
They were returning undefined. They needed to be a function.
Yeah. And then there was another moment when I was actually thinking when I was going in to put the type in the prop types, like what type of actual data I was sending down. I was like, oh yeah, that's a Boolean. And so like kind of helped me like know exactly what type of data was getting passed. So I just take that extra step to think about it, which was nice.
I love it. That's exactly how I look at those things too. They help me like wrap my head around how the component should work and how I should be interacting with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions from the other pair about sort of how this works or anything? Is this fairly familiar to you? Have you worked with React Router before?
Hey guys, sorry. Prop types are new to me. I haven't worked with that before, but I have done router quite a bit. So when I was reviewing it last night, most of it made sense.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, it's nice to see it in person because it's hard for me to like visualize what was happening with like the arrow and everything. But now seeing it looks very good. Yeah, have seen and used router, but I haven't. Like I mentioned in the review, and Radhika posted about hooks, so I have to re-up my knowledge on that one.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, cool. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Jayla and Haley, you want to
Yes.
take us on tour of your work?
Yes. I did do a fresh poll, and now it doesn't seem to want to render locally, so I'm hoping the production will work. But I've got most of the stuff pulled up here already. So unless, Jayla, you wanted...
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I have the demo up, but it's not the production. I just have the local copy. I think I was the last person to touch it.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I have it both merged together, so maybe the local by itself would be... I do have the database up, though.
okay, let me share this. Okay, here it is. So ignore the styling, of course. Ours just kind of got slapped on. This is our, oh, you can't see my fingers, huh? This right here is our, I do that all the time. This is our actual component. So when I merged, I just put the component on top of their work. But of course, we'll move that around. So what we aim to do was connect React Firebase and Firestore to the application, and then also make sure that we can read and write from the database. So we did that by having an input and, I don't know, chips for Super Bowl Sunday. Right now it doesn't show. If I refresh my page, it's gonna take a second, and there it is. So this is this portion automatically reads from the database, and this writes to it. I don't have it open, but they create new instances of data. It's pretty straightforward. I did have a question though that I noticed last night after everything. When we read, it doesn't read in index order. Like chips just got added second to last. Does anybody know why that happens?
It's probably going by like the ID that's been assigned to it in the database. I don't know how your database is set up, but Firestore offers different sorting that you'll be dealing with later in the app too. So if you don't want to mess with this right now, it's totally fine. It'll be addressed later. But if I had to guess, I'd say that it's being assigned an ID and then it's going in order of like those IDs alphabetically,
Okay.
I imagine.
Because this I put in last night and I was like, why is it in the middle? Okay, I'll read up more on that.
I think that Haley has the database pulled up, right? We could take a look at that and see.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just saw it as you typed it in.
It came through.
Popped up as well. So
Hold
yeah,
on,
it goes by the
sharing.
order, but yeah, I can share that part because that was kind of the second part of the request was, okay, should see the database. So here's our chips.
Yeah,
which,
there they are.
It came as the, let me refresh this.
And it looks like it is in alphabetical order by the document ID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then the second part was if we change it here, it should update here.
Oh yeah, let's see that.
So if we change it to, I don't know.
Salsa.
I was gonna say Cheetos.
Cheetos are good.
Cheetos.
No, I'll do is salsa. And then
Salsa
update
flavored
it.
Cheetos.
It should, I think we have to refresh it.
Yeah, there it is. Nice.
Great.
Yeah,
So
interesting
good.
how it
Proof.
orders it. But yes. So.
Awesome. You want to show us around the code too, just so we can get an idea of where
Yeah,
things.
I also have that up here. So yeah, this was the last can't resolve React router down, but I'll take a look at that later. But luckily with the
Just
setup,
need to run
so
npm.
yeah. But yeah, luckily with how the project is set up, this was all input by you all, so that was definitely a kind of quick start. Gives us all the API key, the domain. But for ours, so we had the test file, but then we changed it to, what was it? Item. No, that was yours. It is fresh, but not as fresh.
Oh, it's item.js. It should be right under index.
This one.
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily there was a very helpful guide out there that kind of helped us walk through importing it. And so with the state, and then we added capture input. It always messes up my order because it does all the changes up here and then it renders. So I like to do this first, but yeah, here's our input to capture what we type in, what the value is, and submit it to the database, and then kind of flows through the state here to grab the value. This is where most of the connection with Firestore and Firebase is to add to our items collection. And for the render on the page, we had to do a little bit more searching for waiting for it to mount and then grab from the items, do a request to map over each of them, and then the render to the page here in a list item.
Now there's a bunch of concepts in here that like sort of concepts around kind of NoSQL databases and stuff that I just want to make sure both pairs kind of have a pretty good understanding of. So you know, the Firebase talks about things in terms of collections of documents, right? And documents have properties and values on them. So so we're going to be using that terminology a lot. I guess so the Firestore, can you go back to the code, please?
Yep.
The kind of Firestore component gives us the ability to kind of query these things, query documents and collections and things using kind of component style syntax. It also provides a higher order function that lets you kind of wrap your component with Firestore kind of thing that would allow you actually to get to the database to do these adds in a different way. So this works as well, the db equals firebase.firestore, but you could use a higher order component to do that as well. So anyway, and you like query snapshots and stuff, like you'll get familiar with that as you work with it, but it's you have to, it's a little mind bending at first because you're working all kind of asynchronously. You know, these query snapshots, they update in real time, and then you know a state will go from not loaded to loaded, and then you have data to work with. You have to just if you haven't worked in that style before, it might take a little getting used to. Cool. But React integrates with it really well, so it's a good fit for this.
And
This it's interesting to see that each pair chose to do something different, like class components or functional with hooks. I'm interested to hear what you guys thought about that and why you chose what you did.
Honestly, I haven't worked with hooks too much, and this .set state comes pretty natural to me. And Haley seemed very familiar with setting state that way as well, so it just kind of, I didn't even think to let's throw a hook in there.
Cool.
Yeah. Same. I haven't really used hooks, so that was new to me, but it's definitely kind of up and coming. A lot of people using it. Similar with the functional components. When I first learned React, it was more class-based. So with the feedback there, it's like, yeah, that does make a lot more sense.
Yeah, just last weekend I went through the documentation and kind of read through hooks, and the use state seems pretty simple as a way to kind of drop in and replace this .set state, and use effect will kind of replace like component did mount or component did unmount, like some of those lifecycle components. So you can have both types of components in your project, and it's fine. It just, we'll have to be doing, we could either all decide as a group to settle on one style or the other. If we were going to do that, probably I would recommend hooks, just because it's worth learning as kind of the future direction of it. Or we could have components that do different ways. I mean, it's I don't know. Might be, for simplicity's sake, it might be nice to choose a style, but I wouldn't necessarily dictate that, because y'all are the one that have to work in the code. So
I agree that for simplicity's sake, it'd be cool to choose one, but it's also kind of fascinating to see both in this project, because when you get out into an actual dev role, there's chances that you will see both in whatever project you're working on, and refactoring them to use functional components and hooks is such a fun project. And you're watch me shrink this code down to nothing and make it so much more readable. And it's so it's really good to get familiar with lifestyle components so that you can see how powerful hooks can be and how great they are. So this is interesting. It's very cool. I'm curious to see what you all end up deciding. Michael and Radhika, what do you think about that?
I agree. I know that the React team has explicitly said that they are not deprecating class-based components. So you shouldn't feel bad about writing them. It is a more traditional way, of course, to write React components, but I think they both get the job done. And one thing that's really cool about React is that because it relies so heavily on JavaScript and is not a huge framework, you can have functional components work with class-based components, and it's just fine. So yeah, if we have a reason down the road to make something consistent, I think that would be fine. But for now, I'm happy how it is.
What about oh, go ahead, Radhika. Go ahead.
I'm mixed. I kind of agree, but I would also bias in favor of hooks, because I can safely say, at my older code bases I've used, I'm super familiar with class-based. That's not an issue for me. And specifically with the component life cycles, that was really easy for me to understand. And then all of a sudden, it's use effect. Don't think about component life cycles anymore. So I would say if all four of you are really comfortable with class-based components, challenge yourself and try to wrap your brain around hooks, because I'm still wrapping my brain around it.
I think there will come a time in this app build that you will probably decide you want to be using hooks anyway, just as some forewarning. Might be easier to work with context, for example, because if you're using class-based components, you can't use hooks. So if you're using hooks to manage your state, using context, for example, you're going to have a harder time kind of making the app flow, the state flow through the app.
When you use hooks, do you have to use Redux, or is that kind of eliminates?
Oh, no.
Totally separate.
Then I'm voting for hooks, because I am not a fan of Redux.
Yeah, no, you don't have to Redux at all. In fact, a big thing about hooks is everybody's it can completely replace Redux if you want it to.
Yeah, if you hooks for state and context, React context, which I think is technically, but it kind of came out around the same time, so it's the same. They replace, for apps that are at super large production scale, they can replace Redux. So in an app like this, you wouldn't need Redux, you could use just context and hooks.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd also kind of vote for hooks because I haven't used it, so it'd be good practice. 2 cents there.
All right, awesome. Well, Great demos, everybody. Those were so succinct and beautiful and had great information. A+. Ready for some learning?
All right.
I am.
Are we ready for me?
We're ready
Yeah.
for you.
Go for it, Michael.
Okay. I'm just going to get my presentation up here. Just give me one moment. All right, so you can see my, I'm not sure how this is going to work with like when I hit present.
Do you have notes?
Okay, so you can see my full presentation right now, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Hey everyone, this week we are going to learn a little bit more about code reviews. So real quick, raise your hand. I'm looking at everyone right now. Raise your hand if you participated in one of the 2 PRs that we had merged in this week, either reading it, commenting, either in Slack or as a comment in GitHub. Just give me a hand like this. Cool. So that is what I was expecting to see. Everybody raise their hand. And the reason I wanted to get a vote there was to show you that you are already doing this. Code reviews are, even if you aren't formally taught code reviews, it doesn't mean that you can't participate in them. But I think it's good to talk about some best practices so we can all get on the same page of like what to expect. So like I said, this week you experienced code reviews. At any company that you go work for on any team, you're gonna have some type of code review process. Every team is a little different, so keep that in mind. It really heavily depends on the dynamics of your team. It's possible that you join a team with just one other person and you come to some understanding of like maybe we review code every Friday. Maybe you work on a big team where you're merging stuff in all the time and you review code every day. So definitely keep that in mind when you join a team. Just learn how the team likes to review code and to get kind of an understanding there. But what we're going to talk about here is some general best practices that you can carry over from experience to experience. So, some of the things that I like to focus on when doing code reviews are sharing. So sharing knowledge that I have when writing the code, as well as when I'm actually reviewing the code. I like to share some knowledge that I may have that the person writing the code didn't have. Just it's a time to collaborate with your teammates and have a conversation. When you leave feedback, you can tell people some varying degree of like, this is a suggestion, or you can even say like, hey, I think this is a straight out bug. I think you should fix this before merging. So code review is a good time to iterate on feedback that people give you until the code is satisfactory for everyone. So when you're participating in a code review, there's 2 ends, right? You are the one writing code and receiving feedback, or you're somebody providing feedback to another person. So we're going to talk about first some traits of a good pull request to make sure that the code that you write gets reviewed well. So this one actually took me a bit to figure out as a developer, and it's not cut and dry until you start noticing patterns, but you want to focus on completing one thing in your PR. It's really tempting when you're in there, kind of like, I just watched Aladdin yesterday, so it's fresh in my brain, but you're in the Cave of Wonders and there's treasure all over and they say, touch nothing but the lamp, right? Your ticket says, we want you to create a list, but you get in there and you see all this stuff to touch. So I want to refactor this into a functional component, and I want to write this hook, refactor this. But what ends up happening is you open up a PR, you ask somebody to review it, and it's 10,000 lines long. Nobody wants to review that. They're going to end up like Doug. They're going to open up the PR, go 100 lines in, and then someone will bother them. They'll not focus on the PR anymore, and then you'll have a really hard time of getting it approved. So my suggestion is to focus on one thing at a time in your PRs. You can always open 2, 3, 4, 5 PRs. So nobody's stopping you from doing that work. It's just good to have it reviewed separately. So another thing that you can do to really help other people on review your code effectively is leave a very good detailed description of what the code is doing. So when you open up a PR, right, the first thing you see is the description box. I put one here with, I put no effort into this one. I just put with in the title, work in progress, and then I put no description provided. It's the default message there. So if you open this up, you're just like, well, what's going on here? I don't know what Michael's doing. I have to like now take time to go ask you. And it actually discourages people from popping in and providing you feedback that you may have not like asked specifically to review your code. So I like to add a description to every PR that I work on to make sure that when people pop in and want to give me some feedback, that they have the context necessary to do that. This one kind of bleeds into just software development practices in general, but when you're working with Git, you want to make sure that you write good commit messages. The commit messages, for one, in the code review, tell a story of how you wrote the code. So you might have 10 commits, and when I go in the commit tab, I'm going to see I set the scaffolding, I brought in the third-party dependencies, I created the routes, I created the list component, and that tells me the story of how you created the code. In the future, right, 3 years down the road, you may not be on that team anymore, and somebody else might have to pick that code up, and they might see those commits when they're working with the code. It'll help give them context to be able to maintain that code better than they would without an effective commit message. I don't have a really awesome GIF for this one, but one thing that you can do to help give extra context to the people reviewing your code is to review it yourself. So you open up a PR, and you may have not looked at your code as an entire diff yet. You have been writing it over time. So just pop into the diff tab and look at the code yourself. Even if you see something that may not make sense to somebody with fresh eyes, leave a comment in your own code review. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, and it's generally good practice. I do that now a lot, and it starts conversations where you might need to give people more feedback. So on the other end, right, you will be giving other people feedback through code reviews. So I want to talk about the other end. What are some things you can do to be a better code reviewer? So one of the first things I want to say here, it was really interesting when I worked at Disney, the code review process, you had to get a senior or approved code reviewer to approve your code. And what that did internally was discouraged other people from reviewing code. Since then, I've not worked on any teams that operate this way. In general, if you are a developer, someone who works on that team, you should be encouraged to review that code. So anyone can review code. You don't have to be senior, you don't have to be junior, you don't have to be even maintaining that code. Sometimes as Appier, I'll review code for teams that I'm not on. It helps give me context to stuff that I normally don't work on. So I gave a little, here I put a little GIF or GIF, depending on how you say it. I know I'm starting a hot debate there, I digress. But when you're writing comments in PRs, leave feedback. When you're leaving comments in PRs, leave feedback with context. So you see here, I typed out a message, but I actually have things like syntax highlighting in my code suggestion. And I also put a link to documentation for a function to help the person who wrote the code understand where I'm coming from. When you're writing comments in GitHub, you can do all sorts of stuff with Markdown to make your comment more readable. So I highly suggest doing that. Super helpful. One thing that may be the easiest thing to do when you get into code review is to give feedback on code style. We all have our own opinions on what is readable. We have our own opinions on what is best. What I suggest to you is that you rely on the tools you have, the tools like ESLint and Prettier and TypeScript to enforce these code styles. I'm not saying to not participate in code reviews and give feedback on code styles, but it should be the basis of your review. Your review should be focusing on the stuff that matters. Most of the stuff, as far as like how many new lines between variable declarations and should this variable Boolean start with is, or just little code style stuff like that, can be hashed out with tooling. And when a piece of software gives you feedback like that, it's easy to receive it versus if someone comes into your PR and leaves 100 comments about all your variable names are bad. So this is just one of my general rules of thumb, is to rely on my tools for most of the code style and to not get hung up on stuff that might be preference-based. This one I learned from Zapier and I really like it. I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life, I feel like, but I like to default to approval. So I actually had my own kind of like ego problem back in the day where I felt like my job as code reviewer was to stop bad code at all costs, right? End up being a kind of a point of friction with me and my team. So now when I review code, I always default to approval. I always think about this person's trying to get this code merged in to accomplish a goal. Of course, I'm going to give feedback and leave comments when things are off, right? But I'm going to default to approval. I'm not going to get hung up on the minor details. So yeah, that is my presentation in general. Yeah, so we'll post a link to this, and we have some further reading if you want to learn more about code reviewing. Yeah, so hope you all enjoyed it.
Thanks. Awesome. New information for anybody? Like, does this stuff make sense? Like, what do you think? Any thoughts?
I really like it. Yeah, I mean, this especially coupled with the whole week and how we were like kind of learning from our initial code review, like this helps kind of supplement that and reinforce some of the things that we weren't doing as well the first time, and then now going into the next week. Hopefully we'll implement a lot of these. So yeah, it's really helpful. It's stuff I didn't even think about. So we don't talk about this in code schools. We should, but yeah.
Enter Collab Lab.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, to follow up on that, I was thinking like bootcamp code reviews are definitely very one-sided. You kind of just submit and hope it's correct, and they tell you if it's right or not. So I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah,
What
especially
I
the
would
stuff
like
about.
to know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was going to reference you actually, because especially the stuff that Michael covered about sort of writing a good PR and setting up the code reviewer for success as well. I mean, Stacy's very, very good at this, so you could probably find some examples of PRs that you've submitted and show the group as well.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, a good description of like the problem you're trying to solve, kind of the what and why of the approach, and then even like screenshots before this was a behavior, after this is the behavior.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Animated GIFs, videos, like all kinds of stuff, right? So that kind of stuff just helps the reviewer get oriented super fast and know, okay, this is kind of what I expect to see in the code, and then they either find it or they don't, or whatever.
Yeah,
that's
I'm like super
practice.
duper passionate about verbose commit messages and PRs, because it's like things like I'll pull Michael in on a PR that he has no idea what it is about at all and is not involved in anything that has anything to do with it. And so it's like, if nobody's ever seen any part of this code, like how can you get them familiar with it in like the shortest amount of time? So like putting it together like this nice little like essay, like with a book kind of, it's helpful. Anyway, so what I want to know, and what I think would be helpful for everybody, especially me, because I in particular am very paralyzed when it comes to code reviews. Like I cannot do them. I get like, I shut down. So could one of you, Radhika, Michael, Andrew, anybody, share us your process? Like a PR is up for review, you pop in, and what do you do?
As the reviewer?
Yeah, as the reviewer.
I can, so I'm the most, I don't think I'm the most junior person on my team, but I'm like the newest person on my team, and I'm a junior relatively. So at work, we work through probably 6 different code bases in a week. It's a lot. Corporate life, it's a lot. And that means that sometimes we're jumping between something as old as jQuery and something as new as like hooks. So every time that we walk into a code review, it could be anything. Like really, it's wild out here. So one of the things I will say in particular regarding verbose PR descriptions, my team, some people did it, some people didn't do it as much, and I was very adamant about when I joined, talking in the sprint retros and stuff where we talk about how we did the past 2 weeks. I was very adamant about asking the team to write verbose code reviews, because you're in a, not code reviews, PR descriptions, because you're in like this ticket for 3 days, and you kind of, it all makes sense to you because you've been in it for so long, and someone else comes in and it's like 16 files, 300 lines, and they have no clue what's going on. So first of all, if there's no verbose description in the PR, ask for one. Like have that be your review. I need a description of this before I can move forward with it. So assuming that there is a description, what I like to do is just have the description on one side, obviously read through it a bit, read through the initial ticket again, remember what exactly is being solved, and then have the diff, just GitHub diff on the other side. And usually I try to find, first of all, there's going to be a lot of files and GitHub puts it in a really weird order. So the first thing I would do is try to find kind of the initial file. So in the front end land, that would be like where it's being rendered, and then start to trace it back from there. So that could go back to like the model or the controller, and then it could even go back to like package.json. But usually in GitHub, package.json comes first, and you're like, why is this? What is this? So find like where it all comes together. Even in the backend world, there's going to be a point, and like if whatever the code base is, you kind of start to understand where it is, which folders this is, views, controllers, models, whatever it is. Find where it's happening, and then just trace back. Oh, what is this function name? I don't know what that is. And then if you like Control F, you'll find that's being defined somewhere else. Trace it back all the way until you finally understand how the code works. That's my process, at least.
Speaking of verbose descriptions, one thing I left out of my presentation that I should have covered was you also can give people like step-by-step instructions on how to test your feature. So you've like Radhika said, you're in your code for days, and you know exactly, open the browser, go to this page, click this button. But someone else opening the code is not going to know that. So leave bullet points. Go to this URL. Click this button, type this in the input, expect this. It's very useful to help me get a baseline understanding of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep, great tips.
Yeah, and also on Stacy's note, and also specifically because I'm on a front end team at work, when we're doing front end work, we do require screenshots for relevant browsers. We don't require ourselves to go into IE, but testing is done in IE. But yeah, if it's front end work, we add browsers to the PR. We add screenshots of the browsers to the PR just to help kind of pinpoint exactly where and what's being changed.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, that's all good stuff. I'm trying to think of what my process is. I mean, I do this a lot less now that I'm a manager, so kind of forgotten. I don't know. But it's got a little bit like Radhika, what you're saying, like kind of find where the stuff is kind of showing up, like the visible like effect of it, and then work my way backwards and try to see, you know, how it actually happens. That's pretty similar to how it sounds like to what you do. Good stuff, really good stuff. Anything else? Any other questions from the group? While clicking on the link. Yeah, those are some detailed commit messages too.
I love them. Andrew shared an article with me one day that was like, write good commit messages. And I was like, oh, I will.
It's just another form of communication, right?
Yeah.
Was it semantic commits?
I think
I'm
so,
not
yeah.
a fan of those. Yeah.
It was like that one where I feel like that screenshot in your presentation came from one of those, did it not? That like
that was XKCD, which is a good
I've seen that
topic.
one a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was
are you excited to do code reviews now? So excited. Not nervous at all? Because I'm still nervous about them.
To speak to that feeling of like, you know, being experienced and still being nervous. I was kind of reflecting on my whole career before the presentation, thinking about like how I've grown as a code reviewer. And I asked my wife, Amanda, I said, hey, what's something that like you learn but you never mastered through your whole life? And she said, like, being a spouse. You know, you things change, you learn new things years and years and years later. You're never going to be the perfect partner, right? But you can always strive to get better. And so that's kind of what code review is like. You're never going to be a perfect reviewer. You're never going to have everything down, because like I kind of talked about at the beginning, when you join a new team, there's new processes, new people involved. So you have to relearn these things over and over again. It's just a natural part of the job. So yeah.
One thing I love that a lot of people do on my PRs is like they're very clear about what is a suggestion and what is a blocker. So like when you're leaving code reviews, be sure to like even like preface your comment with this isn't a blocker, or this is just a suggestion, or this is something that will need to get fixed for approval or whatever. So that like, cause like as the person receiving the review, you think everything's a blocker. Like everything immediately seems like it's the worst and you did a terrible job. And so it's like, as the reviewer, if you can help like alleviate some of that like pressure and like just be more specific, that's super helpful.
Also, on that last note, I think one of the interesting things about being a junior who's reviewing seniors code is that it starts to be less. I think the first PR I got in my job, it felt like such a personal attack, like I did so bad. And then like over the next like 2 weeks, I kept pointing out like, oh, look, you made this mistake, or oh, this is like a bad name that doesn't make any sense, or like how I just sound mean. But to my seniors, so it's like it's a mutual process, and like this juniors find things all the time, seniors find things all the time, and it starts to make the team feel a lot more like equitable, like everyone's on the same page and trying to find the same stuff, and everyone does find stuff just in different ways, and everyone finds different things. Like I'm very particular about naming and like clarity in the code, while my senior, for example, is very good at like making things shorter.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. I mean, it's like a chance to learn. It's a chance for everybody to learn. So if you go in and you ask questions to try and find out just for your own learning, kind of find out more about how they went about it, like what their thinking was, that kind of thing. I mean, that's always helpful. And sometimes that even prompts the person who submitted the PR to like rethink a little bit of what they were doing. So they get a little bit of clarity from it as well. So go forth and code review. You're gonna do great. Thanks, Michael, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So good.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you for listening.
So we have I guess 12 minutes left. Let's maybe spend some time looking ahead to the coming week. So I don't know if Stacey, you looked like you were turning over to like looking at the project board.
Yeah,
have it
I
handy?
was getting ready to pop it up. I don't have it handy right now, but I can have it handy in just a couple seconds.
And I guess we need to know who's pairing with whom as well. I can start looking this stuff up at the same time.
Okay, I'll pull up the project board. You find out who's pairing with who.
Will do.
And I'm going to full screen this, and I'm going to share it. Share. Boop. Okay.
Week 2. Haley and Rachel, Matthew and Jayla.
Is this
TCL-4?
Yeah.
Okay. So I see what's happening here. When you finish your, like as you work through your week, you'll want to make sure to review the project board and like move things along as they happen. So when this one was in review, it'd go here. Whenever it's got the reviewer approval from the other folks, it go there. Once Michael, Radhika, or Andrew, or I code review it and approve it, won't be me. Move it here. And then when it's done, you can move it back here. All right, let's take a look at what's next. Next, there is, as a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so I can track purchased items. And there's, as a user, I want to add new items to my shopping list. So it looks like creating the ability to create new lists is one, and the ability to add items to that specific list is another. Who are the pairs, Andrew?
Oh, yeah. They are Haley and Rachel, and
Okay.
Matthew and Jayla.
All right, anything jump out here that somebody wants to claim immediately? It's totally fine to go first. Get it.
Ooh, I already had my eye on one.
All right,
Maybe.
what is it? Tell us.
The number 3. So
Okay, creating
using
the
local
list.
local storage.
All right, Haley's team's taken 3. I'll let you pop in there and assign it to yourself and move
Okay.
it over to the in progress column.
Yeah.
And the other group will be on number 4.
Yeah. So assign yourselves, and then do you want to break out and I didn't enable that feature yet. I can't do it for you. So, but maybe each pair can get on a call with one of the mentors and just talk through kind of your initial approach, get your branch set up, all that kind of stuff.
Sound good?
What I might do is let Michael and Radhika just kind of spin up new Zoom calls, and then I don't know who's going to pair with whom, but y'all can just kind of go off and do that work. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Radhika, do you have a preference to which ticket you pick up this week?
I have preference.
No preference?
Nope.
This
Okay,
is, you know,
I will.
Sorry, just can I say one thing? There's like one thought, like these are kind of, there might be a little need for coordination across these tickets. Like it's early in the project still, so like where these components live and stuff, the two pairs maybe want to be talking to each other about sort of what are, how we're naming things and some of those kinds of things. So
I think it'd be fair to get like a high level idea of what you think you'll need to do over these next couple minutes, and then just be really communicative and Slack about what your plan is, and keep up to date with each other's plans so you can make sure you're not running into like some really hairy merge conflict at the end of the week.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, you guys got this. How about Michael, you just take Haley's group and Radhika, you take the other group, and we'll close this down. You can spin up new Zoom links and hustle bustle. Any last questions before we close this one?
Do we have to close this Zoom? We can just stay on this for one group, right?
Yeah. I might make you the host, and then I'll drop off. Is that cool?
I will make a new Zoom.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
All right. Have a great week. You all did amazing. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bye.
Well done.
Haley.
Seriously.
Oh, I guess I should stop sharing, huh? Never. Just kidding. Okay. Bye.